The very nature of the hard luxury market means that despite a growing online presence, the vast majority of purchases are still made in store. Now, when you consider that sales can be as little as 1 to 2 units per year, it can be very difficult to know what stock to actually hold within the stores. Today on LokadTV, we're going to understand this challenge and discuss what these luxury stores can do in order to optimize their assortment. So Johannes, what is it that's so interesting about the assortment that a luxury store holds?
In hard luxury, what is interesting is that it's literally your stock that creates demand. People are not going to buy, a $10,000 watch on catalog. I mean, maybe few people do. We did some analysis with some data, with some clients on that, but it's like a single-digit percentage, and it's not even a large single-digit percentage, like a small single-digit percentages. So it's really the experience in the store that basically can lead to a successful acquisition of a piece that is remarkably, maybe remarkably beautiful and fairly expensive. I mean, depends exactly where you stand in this area, but that's I would say one of the key angle of luxury in the first place.
Okay, it might be useful to just sort of clarify what we sort of mean when we're talking about these hard luxury stores. So kind of where are they located, who's their target market, and what do they tend to sell?
And where they're located, well, typically there is one area in every large metropole, first world large metropoles, where you will find all the very, very expensive shops. Plenty of reasons historical in Europe for that, sometimes logistical, sometimes it's other reasons, but basically it's usually fairly concentrated. And the audience, I would say, is contrary to maybe popular belief, it's mostly upper middle class. If you're a billionaire, even if you spend, a lot of money on hard luxury goods, you're not going to spend, the majority of your fortunes, and there is only a very few billionaires around. I mean, all things considered, compared to, let's say, people who will be making, I don't know, anywhere up to starting from, let's say, $100,000, a year makes you like a prime candidate to sometimes spend $5,000 on a fairly expensive piece of jewelry or a watch or extra. So it might be surprising, but people who are like the clients are not necessarily exceedingly rich. They are wealthy, but not billionaire.
Okay, they're certainly the areas we'd be avoiding in Paris to a certain extent. So you sort of mentioned there a bit about sort of the catalogue. What are the key challenges that they kind of face?
So the key challenge is that how do you decide? You have your catalogue. That's a business like fashion that is driven by novelty. Hard luxury is also driven by novelty, not to the extent obviously of fast fashion, but still novelty is very important. And it's really what is driving the sales. So you combine the fact that you have very limited amount of data. I mean, you have like 1 unit being sold per year per store, per product reference. And the fact that on top of that, products don't last 2 decades. You rotate your collections. And thus, that gives the impression that you almost have no data whatsoever to do anything quantitative, which is not true. I mean, nowadays there are many brands. This sector has undergone a lot of consolidation. It has grown a lot also over the last decades, and most, I would say, they are well-known, hard luxury brands have dozens of stores. So I mean, so they are not exactly like super small. And the interesting thing is from I would say, a supply chain perspective, where you really think about, how do I bring the things that will maximize, my impact in the market and fulfill the largest amount of desires, I would say, is that the classic time series perspective that is like ubiquitous in supply chain analytics is just completely wrong as far hard luxury is concerned. That just doesn't work at all. Everything is way too sparse. But it would be completely the wrong conclusion to conclude that because time series don't work at all in hard luxury, that's suddenly the only thing that you can do is guesstimation, and that's the best you can do.
Okay, so what can we do then? Because I mean, what you're kind of describing here is if you're just looking at the data of one store, there's not actually that much data to infer some kind of relevant conclusions. But if you look across a whole network, you start to have something where you can kind of build a bigger picture.
Exactly. I mean, first, even I would say hard luxury brands, even if the amount of unit being sold are small, we are still usually talking of tenths of thousands of units per year, even for brands that are not necessarily, I would say, among the largest brands. So this is, in aggregate, very statistically significant. But if you start by, I would say you have certain class of statistical methods that are going to be exceedingly poor to do anything with this data. Because those methods are actually very demanding in terms of amounts of data. I mean, time series, I just mentioned, time series works very nice if you're like Procter & Gamble and producing shampoos in very large quantities. But time series requires a lot of data. So time series, I would say, are out. You have other methods like clustering that also work nicely. If you have lots of data, clustering is going to be very bad by design in sort of situations. So the first insight is that you want to leverage more than just the time series perspective on the data. You know a lot more. I mean, first, usually every single unit you sell is usually to a known client. I mean, not all the time, but usually for those type of products, you have like loyalty cards or loyalty programs. I mean, you know your clients for many reasons. So in this regard, it's I would say hard luxury is a bit like e-commerce. Your clients are usually identified. You know them, even if it's in a store. So that's a very good property. And also another thing that might not be super intuitive for hard luxury is that it's repeat business. People who buy expensive watches are most likely going to buy several in their lifetime. So it might sound a bit unfair, but it's this sort of markets where you have like passionate amateurs that are going to buy an expensive piece every couple of years. So it's repeat business. So the starting point is to think of your products as as a graph of your sales as a graph that connects your products to clients. And it's not like a time series where you see units being sold. No, you know that this unit has been sold to this particular client. And thus you have a very rich data structure that connects your clients with your products. And that's probably the starting point to start thinking about the assortment. What does a good assortment means? It means a good assortment is to have the pieces in a store that maximize the coverage of desire of the clients that can walk into the store.
Okay, so basically what you're describing is by having that understanding of what that individual client wants, you can ensure that most likely in 2 years, 3 years' time when he makes his next purchase, you have the next latest, biggest thing ready for them in store when they might want it.
Yes, I mean, the key idea is that if you want to start understanding, the power of an assortment. So what does that mean? That means that you're going to make a selection of pieces where at most you will have one unit in the store. And in order to know what does that even mean, the power of an assortment, what does that mean quantitatively? I mean, there is a way, and here we have to think about the fact that you have a lot of cannibalization, substitutions taking place. It's not, there is no like mechanical compatibilities. You're not selling car parts. So watches, pretty much, I mean, you will have obviously, models for men, models for women, but, and maybe you have some models that are better suited for large men and some models that are more suited for for people that are shorter or, thinner. But beside, those, I would say, rough consideration, there are tons of cannibalization, substitution that are possible. You know, people can hesitate between things that are widely different. So the bottom line is that how do you quantitatively address that? And most people think incorrectly that, oh, it's just impossible. It's only, you know, human insight who can grasp, you know, who can do this sort of analysis. I am absolutely not in, I would say, I don't believe that for one second. And the way you can quantitatively, you know, assess source cannibalization, substitution, is by analyzing the graph that connects customers with products. That's the way you can basically establish some kind of affinity where every single client that you've ever observed is basically defined by what he or she has done in the past, the product that has been purchased, and that gives you some kind of a, let's say, a profile. And every single product has also a profile. The profile is just, you know, the dual reflection data-wise of this idea client-wise, which is every product has an affinity to certain clients. And thus, when you want to choose an assortment, you want to choose an assortment that in terms of affinity maximize, you know, your affinity to the population of clients that can actually enter the store.
Okay, so kind of the main aim of the game is to have the optimum assortment for each store for all of the clients that kind of frequent that store. From a data perspective, it all sounds great, but how easy is it to actually do in reality?
So I would not say that it's easy, but my experience with hard luxury is that it's not the worst. I mean, first, those companies have, which is completely unsurprising, excellent traceability, you know, which is completely unsurprising because guess what? If you're selling, you know, expensive things made of precious metals, traceability is, I mean, it's very important. Otherwise, you know, things would get stolen or would disappear. So obviously, in these sort of businesses, I would say an absolute traceability of every single part or pieces has been in place, you know, typically for decades. It's not necessarily, you know, state-of-the-art cloud-based IT systems, but usually it's fairly robust, and given enough time and effort, you can get all the data that you need. And by the way, the data is not just the sales. That's only, I would say, half of the picture. You need to know what was present at any point of time in any store. Because it's not just the sales that matter, it's understanding that what was present in the store when this unit was sold, or conversely, when this unit was not sold, what was actually lacking from the store.
So the idea there is you're understanding what were the choices that weren't made as well as the choice that was actually made.
Absolutely. And so you need to literally know kind of day by day exactly what was the assortment at any point of time. Then, I mean, you don't need to have like super high precision. For example, because, you know, inventory rotates very slowly, even if you only have like historical stock levels at the end of the month, it's not, you know, the end of the world. You can reconstruct a fairly accurate vision of what was the stock levels, and by stock level I pretty much mean what was present in the store or not at any point of time. And then you need also to have some attributes about the products. But again, in hard luxury, your catalog are large, several thousands of units, but they are not like exceedingly large, never like a million different, you know, type of products. No, it's just usually a few thousands. And thus you can have a lot of attributes, you know, such as the precious metals that are being used, the type of stones, the price point, the style, maybe the sub-collection, extra. So you can have typically about 20 attributes that qualified your products.
Okay then, so if I'm a store manager, for example, and I'm a brand and I've got 20 units that I need to know where to put and when to place them there, what do you actually do?
So typically, stock allocations is going to be decided by the central, so maybe not at the store level. But otherwise it's a very valid question. You've just produced 20 units for a novelty. What do you do with that? So the whole process was just push them to your 20 best performing stores with 1 unit per store. The Lokad perspective is very, very different. And actually, it's actually quite straightforward when you think about it. First, you need to have a probabilistic modelization of the power of your assortment. So that means that you take a store, you have those units, and that will directly tell you, what are the odds expressed with probabilities of having every single one of those units being sold over any period of time. That can be next month, next quarter, next year. And I'm saying that it's probabilistic forecast because we are talking of numbers that are very, very small. So when you want to think about the performance of an assortment, you can't make, it's usually wishful thinking to say, I'm going to sell this unit at this date in this store. It's completely impossible to get to this level of precision. You have some degree of irreducible uncertainty, so you need basically probabilistic forecasting. So okay, you have like a probabilistic model of the performance of your assortment. And that really depends on exactly what do you have in your store exactly. So what are the products that are present and the ones that are absent. Now you have a novel unit to push. So the question will be, you can say, I take the first store and I will kind of probe my model to basically say, dear model, tell me if I add this 1 unit to this store, what is the outcome? And by the way, you will simulate what are the future sales with their respective probabilities, and you will see what is the probability that this unit gets sold, but also how much cannibalization are involved. Because yes, if you push this novelty to this store, it might actually sell well, but if you're just cannibalizing units around, then basically you've not gained much. So you can assess for 1 unit that you push in a store exactly what is the financial outcome, the average financial outcome, thanks to probabilistic forecast. And that takes into account cannibalization. And then you can simulate the same unit being pushed to another store, and to a third store, and the fourth, until you can simulate to all your stores. And from that, you can assess what is the store that is going to give you, the best results. And you would think, oh, it's just going to be the best store. Well, not really, because, your best store has already a lot of stock, it has already a lot of stuff. So, you get diminishing returns because of those cannibalization. So typically, when we are going to start to have this quantitative analysis, we are going to realize that this first unit that you want to push somewhere in your network, well, the best location is not the number 1 store. Usually it's going to be still a fairly good store if you look at the whole list of stores, but it might not be the first one. It might actually be something in the top 10 store instead of being the number 1 store. And then, okay, so you've decided to allocate this unit to this store, which means that what about the second unit? You have 20 units to place. So what about the second units? Second units, you're going to just repeat this process that we just did, except that you've already placed the first unit. So you know that one store has now an assortment that is slightly different because it has 1 more unit of something. And you can repeat that again and again, and that will give you a complete spread. And the interesting thing is that once you have this kind of modelization in place, you can go and look at any unit that is currently in the network and ask yourself, is this unit really where it should be? Can I just move it somewhere else, and what is the outcome? So when you move a unit, you will basically probe your mathematical predictive modelization of the power of the assortment by basically asking the question, if I remove this unit from this store, what do I lose? Obviously, you will probably lose something because suddenly there is less, you've kind of diminished the power of the assortment of this store. And what do you gain? Because you've actually moved the unit somewhere else. with some friction, which represent the time in which the unit will be traveling.
Okay, final question then. If you're kind of a luxury store and you want to kind of implement this, what's kind of the first steps you should take? Is it all about ensuring you've got all of the client data, ensuring you know exactly what are the sales you've made, but also knowing what you've held in the store as well?
The first question would be, are you even ready to start, in terms of culture shock doing optimization? Because usually it's kind of a culture shock because maybe, the best stores was just considering itself as entitled to 100% of the novelty, and maybe suddenly when you start playing this game, you would say, well, you're entitled to, a fair share of the novelty, maybe, more than half of the novelty, maybe not 100%. So it's a culture shock, and suddenly people, when you start doing optimization, especially when you're optimized against dollars of error, dollars of opportunity, when you're in a company that has been only driven by intuition quite successfully, I would add, for several decades, it's a real shock. And also sometimes it's a real shock to even realize that that sometimes your intuition was incorrect. I mean, people can put a lot of egos on that. That's the problem with a numeric optimization, is that it kind of don't care about your opinion on the fact. So the culture shock can be quite strong, and that's probably the first step, is probably to start by trying to rationalize and approach this problem in a fairly dispassionate way, which can be very difficult in an industry which is kind of driven by passion, So I will probably leave it at that, but that's probably the first step and the most difficult step for most hard luxury brands.
Okay, brilliant. Okay, that's everything for this week. Thanks very much for tuning in, and we'll see you again in the next episode. Bye for now.